On Saturday, June the 23rd, 2018, a football team consisting of boys aged 11 to 16, along with their 25-year-old assistant coach, entered a caving system to explore after a practice session. This cave was Tham Luang Nang Non, or Tham Luang Cave for short, and was relatively unknown to the world until that day. Shortly after the boys entered the cave, heavy rain began pouring from the sky. The boys had no choice other than to flee further into the cave as the rainfall flooded the cave system, blocking their exit. After authorities were alerted, it was a race against time to save the trapped football team, but were they successful? Let's find out. This is the infamous Tham Luang Cave disaster. Every Saturday, the young Thai football team known as the Wild Boars would meet up on a rough field and practice. The group resided in the Mae Sai district of the Chiang Rai province of northern Thailand. The area is characterised by its stunning landscapes of mountains, valleys, and the winding Mae Sai River. Within this region is the Tham Luang Cave. Tham Luang is a complex and expansive cave system located near the town of Mae Sai. The cave is known for its winding tunnels, large chambers, and narrow passages, some of which are submerged during the rainy season. On the 23rd of June 2018, the football team had planned to go to the cave, with assistant coach Ake leading the way and showing them where to go. After practice that day, assistant coach Ikapol Chantwong, nicknamed Ake for short, who was 25 years old, agreed to take the boys to the cave. Ake had visited the cave before and told the team that they would only stay an hour before returning home. Although this may seem reckless, the cave was not isolated, and when the weather was okay, it wasn't particularly dangerous. And with June being a month before monsoon season, he thought it would be fine to take them. 12 of the boys and Ake rode their bicycles to the cave, abandoning them at the cave entrance. The weather was hot and sunny when they entered the cave at 4 o'clock. Little did they know, shortly after entering the cave, it began to rain, heavily. When they turned back, they noticed the passages they had scrambled through to get through were starting to flood. Ake knew there was no other way out, so he decided to try and swim through the flooded area. He knew if he could get through, the others could, but this was not the case. Shortly after diving into the water, he was forced to turn back. It was worse than he thought. The rain had also gotten worse, which meant the water was beginning to rise. Because of this, the Wild Boars were forced to flee further into the cave until they reached a chamber known as Pattaya Beach. Here, they found themselves on a mud slope, in the dark, surrounded by water. They waited for the water to recede, but it didn't. The boys and their coach were now trapped, deep within the cave, with no way to get out. When the boys didn't return home, their parents started to worry. Parents would phone other parents asking if their child had returned home, only to hear that they hadn't. The worried parents then began to text and call head coach Naparat Kanthawong, and at 7 o'clock, he checked his phone to see 20 missed calls. Confused and worried, he rang assistant coach Ake but was unable to get through to him. He then began to ring the boys in the team, and one by one, their phones would go to voicemail. He knew something was seriously wrong. Eventually, he managed to get through to Sompong, a 13-year-old member of the team who was at practice that day. He was unable to go to the cave with the rest of the boys and ended up going home instead. He told the coach that the boys, along with Ake, had ventured to Tham Luang Cave, but they should have been out by now. As soon as he heard this, Kanthawong got onto his bike and raced to the cave's entrance, only to find the abandoned bicycles and a flooded cave. He quickly alerted authorities, who rushed to the scene, and they knew exactly who to contact. An hour's drive to the south, close to Chiang Rai, was a man by the name of Vernon Unsworth, whose expertise of Tham Luang Cave was unrivaled. Originally from England, Vernon made a name for himself exploring the Yorkshire Dales, and was a very experienced caver. He lived partly in Thailand and would visit Tham Luang Cave often. According to Unsworth, the cave became his second home for over 5 years. He ventured further and deeper than any previous explorer, recording measurements and notes during his trips. Authorities called Unsworth, and he arrived at the cave the same night. He was able to provide them with important key information. He said that in the cave system, there were 2 junctions, one that remains flooded during the dry season, and the other that leads to Pattaya Beach. This was crucial as they now knew where the boys were, because they couldn't have gone through the flooded way. He also said that very experienced divers were required and gave 3 names to the authorities. These were Rick Stanton, John Volanthen, and Robert Harper, who worked with the British Cave Rescue Council, and they arrived on the Wednesday. Meanwhile, within the cave, the boys remained there, not even knowing anyone knew where they were. Luckily, due to cracks within the cave, some air could come through, so they could breathe. They had no food, but water was present in the form of moisture dripping from the cave walls. To keep warm, they used rocks to form a 5-meter tunnel in a wall and huddled together. Ake was also a Buddhist monk. He taught the children meditation techniques to keep them calm and use as little air as possible. They had torches and each other, but there was nothing else they could do except wait to be rescued. Hundreds of volunteers and experienced cavers and divers showed up at Tham Luang Cave to help. The first job was to divert the water, which proved difficult as rain was still falling. Streams in the mountains above were diverted elsewhere, and pumps sucked out millions of litres of water from the cave. Divers were sent into the cave, but one by one they turned back. The mission was too difficult, and then a few days into the rescue operation, they had to suspend their search due to heavy rainfall. Work didn't begin again until July the 2nd, 9 days after the boys had been trapped in the cave. That same day at 10 p.m, Rick Stanton and John Volanthen managed to surface near the boys, but they couldn't see them. They swam further through a narrow tunnel and once again surfaced. Here, after 9 days, they discovered the boys trapped in a small confined space, and John mustered the words, "How many of you?" They replied 13. The boys had been found, but they couldn't be rescued that day. The divers told them to wait and that they would be back with help. The next day, Thai seals swam to the group, bringing them food, water, and blankets. A few of them, including a medic, stayed with them, but now they had the task of bringing them out of the cave. They had no idea how to get the boys out. Initially, 3 primary strategies were considered to rescue the wild boars. The first was to simply wait for the monsoon to stop, so that they could walk out, but this could take way over a month, would use substantial resources, and risk the lives of divers going back and forth. So they crossed this option off the list. One diver had already lost his life, a man by the name of Saman Gunan, whose job was to place oxygen tanks inside the cave. He was highly experienced, so if he could lose his life, anyone could. The second idea was to dig them out, but this would have taken too long, which left them with one option: swim them out. This was by far the most dangerous and risky move, but there was nothing else they could do. On July the 8th, a team of divers including Harris, Stanton and Volanthen got to work. They decided they would sedate the boys so they would breathe properly without panicking. They put them in wetsuits and a full face mask, fit with a harness so that they could be transported. Each boy was described as a package, and they were slowly manoeuvred out by the divers. This was no easy task. They swam through narrow passages, and they had to focus on making sure the boys' face masks did not dislodge. Once past flooded sections, the boys were then stretchered until the next flooded passage, where they were sedated further and resubmerged. 4 hours after he left the ledge near Pattaya Beach, the first wild boar was transported to the cave entrance, alive and in fairly good health. He was then flew to hospital. 45 minutes after this, another emerged. 4 of the boys were rescued that day, but due to the time taken for each one, that was all they could do. They would regroup on July the 9th and start again. On July the 9th, 4 more boys were rescued from the cave, and on July the 10th, 5 more. Coach Ake was the last to leave. All of the boys were now saved, but the cave had one last surprise for rescuers. According to reports, once all the boys had been rescued, a water pump stopped working, causing the water level in the cave to rise rapidly. The rescuers left their equipment in the cave and had to flee, but thankfully everyone managed to get out. The boys were saved, but next, they had to recover and were put onto a diet of rice porridge for the next few days. They wore sunglasses to reduce damage to their eyes and were given antibiotics, but other than this, they were in good shape. After 8 days, all of the boys were released from the hospital. This case garnered massive media attention all over the world, and the boys were put into the spotlight almost straight away. In a press conference, they said at first they were scared their parents would be angry, then they were just scared. They were thankful to be alive, and thankful for their rescuers, who in my opinion are absolute heroes. Thousands came to honour the fallen diver, and a plaque was put in place to remember him. There were split opinions on whether Coach Ake was to blame, but none of the players or the players' parents agreed. It was a freak accident, the rain was early, and he was able to keep the boys calm and get them through this ordeal. In reality, they were just very unlucky with their timing. Even Vern Unsworth was planning to make the trip the next day. He said, "Nobody's to blame, not the coach, not the boys. They were just very unlucky. It wasn't just the rain that day. The mountain is like a sponge, and waters from earlier rain were raising the levels. To the boys and their parents, Ake was their hero, and things would have been much worse without him." The unwavering courage and commitment of the rescuers transformed them into genuine heroes. Against stacked odds, these brave individuals risked their own safety to save others, with one sadly losing his life. Their selfless acts of heroism, navigating treacherous conditions and relentless challenges, brought about the triumphant rescue of the trapped boys, and the rescuers should always be remembered as heroes. As always, this is not an AI channel, I do everything myself, and if you appreciate my work, subscribe, and if you want to go the extra step to support the channel, maybe consider becoming a member. I remember seeing this case on the news and following it quite closely. It is amazing that they all managed to get out, and the story ended somewhat happy for once. Let me know what you think about this one in the comments below. As always, thank you for watching.